You found us through fly fishing. You'll stay for our passion and the community. Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Podcast.
Yeah, but he doesn't get it. How come fly fishermen don't get it?
You only haul with the short power snap.
Look for where people walk and the insides of bends and hunt those.
The roof blew off and the interior walls got sucked out. And the trees are just coming up. And I mean, he's clearly not going to clear the trees.
It is not a fly fishing story. It's a story about me trying to understand my brother through fly fishing.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today.
We've been waiting for you. Follow our guests, follow us on Instagram, and share this episode and the love if you enjoy this podcast. And we are live in 3, 2, 1. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing good, Dave. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, good to talk to you. It's been quite a while. It blows my mind on some of this because it was episode 63 when we did our last episode, and we're above I think 530 now. So
wow.
We're running and rolling over here. So it's been a long time. I want to catch up with you on everything. I think everybody knows you out there with Orvis. And you're always doing some great things in education and travel. But give us a little update. So since then, that was a few years ago. What's been new? Anything new with you or Orvis out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, Orvis has always got cool new products. And luckily, my fishing buddies are also the product developers. So I get to see them pretty early on and play with them. Yeah, there's some new stuff coming, but they'd shoot me if I told you. So I can't really tell you. But, the product developers are always pushing the envelope and always trying to improve things. And I think they've done a really good job. It's probably the best product development team we've ever had by far that we've ever had at Orvis.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Yeah. And I've heard, obviously just because you're Orvis, we hear a lot of good things out there. And one of the things I heard from somebody, I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about waders, I think. And they said how great the warranty was on Orvis. They said that basically they've got these waders, and if you have an issue, Orvis will take care of you. And it's kind of like that almost for life. Like, talk about that a little bit. Is that like if you get a pair of waders, it's pretty much warranted for life? Is that how it works?
No, that's not true. And
No.
I think anybody that says that or tries to do that is being a little foolish, because waders wear out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you have a pair of waders for 4 or 5 years, customer service will make you happy, and they might give you a discount on a new pair of waders. Or we have a repair service.
Oh, nice.
That people can use that do a really good professional job of repairing them. But they're not guaranteed for life. I mean, no. If they leak in a year or two, and it's not barbed wire, we'll make good on it. And we want to keep our customers happy, but they're not warranted for life.
Okay, good.
To do that.
So they're off of that. I thought that when they were telling me, I was thinking like, wow, that is pretty extreme.
No, and I don't think any wader manufacturer will do that for you.
Okay, well, I love the warranty because we recently had a big guest on the podcast who I can say now is coming up, Yvonne Chenard, and he talked about the just Patagonia and their kind of how they fix things, right? I think, do you feel like Orvis? I know you guys do a lot of great stuff with the in the conservation. Is that kind of a similar thing that you do about trying to repair things? So we're trying to reduce the number of products out there.
Yeah, because there isn't much you can do with a leaky pair of waders other than maybe cut off the boots and make a pair of rain pants out of them or something. But we try to if it's just a seam leak after 4 or 5 years, that can be fixed. I just produced a video on how to repair waders yourself, because it's not that hard, and I find it kind of fun and satisfying. With a tube of aqua seal and a flashlight and maybe a shop vac, you can find leaks and repair them almost anything. So,
yeah, I love that. Well, I think we're going to hold. Maybe we'll hold that tip off till a little bit towards the end, because today you got a vast knowledge. I think the education is amazing because we're always trying to think. We've got a small little education center and travel program and stuff like that, but nothing like Orvis. And you guys, I think, are kind of leading out there with everything you have going. So I want to touch on that today. And part of that is, I think you're going to be, well, I know you're going to be at the Virginia Fly Fishing and Wine Festival, right? First of all, on that, tell me this. Are you a kind of a wine drinker or a beer drinker, or how did Beau coax you into attending the festival?
Well, Beau's an old friend.
Yeah.
And I'm very fond of Beau, and he's been really good to me. It's a great show. It's very family oriented. The crowd there is wonderful and welcoming. And, Beau is a pretty cool guy. I mean, I remember the first year I went, he sent my wife flowers to thank her for letting me go.
Oh, wow.
And that's that's the kind of person Beau is, if you're really thoughtful.
Cool.
So I like the show.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I think Beau, when we had him on the podcast, I was thinking about this, but I think anybody that cries on your podcast right away for me gets next level. And he described the book he was writing at the time, and his connection to some of the wounded veterans and things like that. Right? I think he's got a lot of passion.
Yep. And I plan on having him on the podcast for that.
Oh, nice.
Book, and then I want to talk to him about access issues, because he's dug into the public versus private state law, riparian zone issue deeper than anyone, and he's got a broad knowledge, and I really want to talk to him about that.
Right. Gosh, there's so many topics. I love talking to you because you're bringing up all these great topics, and that's one we want to tee up too. It is interesting.
Don't you try to beat me to it.
No, I'm not. I won't. You got it. I'll give you it first. So,
okay.
Well, let's. And I also want to touch base on the podcast, because obviously you've got the largest podcast out there. This podcast that's really great. But let's jump into some topics from the festival that you're heading to, and I want to tee this up. Just one of the topic headlines is, how would we take, I think it's like trout to the next level. And I think that's something that's always interesting. We just got back from a trip, Euro nymph fishing. And it was one of those things where we had an expert guide. We had Pete Erickson, who was helping guide us.
Oh, yeah. Pete's great.
Yeah, and it was really amazing. And so that's one way to take to the next level, right? But
yeah,
it's not easy when you're just out there reading, listening, all that. Can you break that down a little bit? Maybe talk about that. If somebody comes in, they're like, they've been trout fishing for many years, but maybe they're ready to, I don't know, what is the next level from that person?
Yeah, it really depends on what you've concentrated on. But you touched on one thing that I recommend for people, and this is someone who's maybe just had a few fly casting lessons, or maybe somebody that's been doing it for years. I mean, we can all learn, right? We wouldn't do this if we didn't learn something new every time we went out. And so I touch on about 12 things that I recommend. I call it my 12-step program.
Nice.
I touch on 12 things, and I won't go through all of them, but
sure.
Two of them is to be a generalist. You talk to people all the time that only dry fly fish, or only Euro nymph, or only streamer fish for big fish. And, A, they're missing a lot of fun, but B, if you get outside of your comfort zone and try something else, like, trout spay, you're going to learn stuff. Even if you don't like it, you're going to learn stuff that when you go back to your preferred method, you're going to learn stuff that can benefit you greatly.
Nice.
For instance. Yeah. I like fishing dry dropper. I'm not very good at Euro nymphing, and I don't especially care for it, although I do it, and I'm trying to get better at it because it's so effective.
Yeah.
But I've learned a lot from Euro nymphing that I've applied to my dry dropper fishing, using a longer, thinner tippet, keeping the rod high during a dry dropper. I've really changed the way I approach dry dropper fishing from what I've learned in Euro nymphing.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So, and there is a lot of overlap. And then even like dry dropper versus, like indicator, right? I mean, is that something, do you find yourself fishing more dry droppers than indicators out there?
Yeah, I've really, unless I'm fishing really deep, heavy water early spring, I don't want to miss that strike on, too many times I've had fish take a strike indicator, and, a good high floating chubby Chernobyl is so much more effective than a plastic bobber, I think. And,
right.
There's lots of times there's a chance and fish might come up and take that big dry. So my indicators haven't been used much in the past couple of years, except very early in the season.
Skwala fly fishing, combining advanced materials with fishing-focused, purpose-built design. Skwala waders, jackets, shirts, pants, and insulation are made for us. To help Wet Fly Swing listeners right now, Skwala is offering a 10% discount on your next order. Just visit skwalafishing.com and use the coupon code WetFlySwing10 at checkout. That's Skwala, SKWALA. Gear for us, the serious angler. Good. I think that's a good first step, being a generalist, not restricting yourself just to, whatever that is, that category is. What else should we be thinking about? And let's paint the picture of somebody. Let's just take somebody like myself. I've been fishing for many years. I'm definitely not an expert, not a guru at really anything. I am kind of a generalist. But, how would I feel like my casting's okay, although like my dad casts a lot better than me. I feel like I have work to do there. What else do we need to think about to take it to the next level?
Well, casting is essential, and the better you cast, the better your form, the better all your casts are going to be. So concentrating on that standard overhead cast, unless you're Euro nympher, and then you don't have to worry.
Right.
But concentrating on that standard overhead cast is going to make your double haul better. And I am so surprised at the people that I meet who don't know how to do a reach cast.
Oh, yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, if you don't know how to do a reach cast, you're not in the game for trout fishing and a lot of other fishing too. And I'm just blown away. I was hosting a trip in Idaho about a month ago, and I was fishing with a woman, one of the guests one day. And she was really good. She was, she could cast, and she had tons of energy and really fishy, but she didn't know how to do a reach cast. And the guide and I were, worked her through 10 minutes or so of doing a reach cast, and she got it. But she had never tried to do it before. And I just can't imagine anyone who trout fishes not knowing how to do reach cast.
Yeah. And I want to touch on the reach cast. But that trip, I remember that because actually I think we were there at the same time, because when we went there, we kind of hosted a trip there as well. And somebody was like, hey, Tom Rosenbauer is here somewhere. Like, were you guys on the, was this the Snake River?
Yeah, we were on the South Fork and Henry Fork.
Oh, you were? Oh, yeah. So we fished the same water. So let's hear the trip. I think it was the same week or close by. How'd you guys do?
We did okay. I mean, the fishing's always good there. Last year, we had 70 degrees and sunny every day on the same week, and I was kind of bummed.
Yeah, too much sun.
I mean, the weather was beautiful, but I was hoping for some streamer fishing and some blueing olives, and of course, we didn't see much. So we had some nice, cold, miserable, rainy days, and the streamer fishing was better, caught some big brown trout, and then we had nice days too. So, yeah, those rivers are just so great that there's always something.
There's always something. Did you guys find the Henry's Fork or the South Fork was the more productive?
I found the South Fork was more productive. I fished the ranch a bit, and that was quite frustrating. I fished the ranch on my own. I don't like taking guests there because it's so difficult. But the Lower Henry's Fork was good, but it wasn't lights out. And the South, we had a couple of really good days on the South Fork.
Nice. And you guys were floating?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it was fun for me because I took, I'm a big drift boat nut, and I hadn't floated in rode a hide, any fiberglass. So I rode a hide the whole trip, and it was so much fun because, those boats are so designed for that, fishing out of the boat. And I run like a big Koffler, like more of a gear boat sort of thing. So it was a lot of fun for me, just even without even fishing much, you know what I mean? Just kind of rowing along the trip. And did you guys have, I guess you have your own program, right? You have your own Orvis endorsed lodges down there, right?
Yeah, I've been Three Rivers Lodge in it's outside of Ashton is it's the oldest Orvis endorsed lodge, and it's had the same owners since like the turn of the 20th century. So it's well established. It's very much a family run organization. The guides have all been there for years, and the food is they've had the same chef for 40 years. So it's like home for me. It's a pretty special place. So I host a trip there every fall.
That's amazing. When you guys do those host trips, and I know it's cool because you've got these, we've talked about it, we've had a few, people on the podcast, who was Lucas from AFTA recently. We were talking about, I think he won an award or one of those the years, but because you guys do the Orvis kind of guide of the year, I think lodge of the year sort of stuff.
Right.
And,
Yep.
and it was interesting because people were talking about, how they did it, how they got up to that level, because that's obviously makes a big impact on their business. And so it's really cool. Has that been going along for a long time?
Yeah. 30 some years, a long time.
Gotcha. Yeah. Quite a long time. So,
yeah.
Well, in the Three Rivers Lodge, definitely there's so many. We've been doing a number of episodes from that area prior to our trip out there. So I've talked to a few of them, and I know, Oliver White's got a lodge out there now. So it seems like it's kind of one of those. Where are the meccas? Let's just take it there for a second. That seems like one. When you think of places to go in the U.S., because there's not a lot of places you can do the lodge thing, is it mostly a Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, or is there stuff around the country?
No, there's stuff around the country. There's a really, really great lodge on the Delaware here in the east, and there's they're all around the country, but they are concentrated in the American West just because there's so much variety and so much more land and public land. So I would imagine probably 2/3 of the endorsed lodges are in the American West.
Yeah, that's right. Awesome. Well, let's go back to that reach cast, because we've talked about that before, but I want to hear from you, and it's hard to describe on a podcast, but what is that reach cast, and when would you really want to use that?
Well, the thing that I don't try to teach people in my presentation, I tell them to go to YouTube.
Oh, there you go.
Watch Pete Kutzer do it.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically you're making a mend in the air before your line hits the water, instead of waiting until your line hits the water and then, making a lot of commotion. A mend often moves your fly or your indicator or whatever. Set it up beforehand, do that mend in the air beforehand, basically an aerial mend. And exactly where you reach that rod is, a matter of practice and muscle memory. So people need to practice it just like anything else. But watching a video on someone like Pete on the Orvis Learning Center showing how to do it and actually where to put the reach, you can put it closer to your fly, you can put it closer to you, depending on where the conflicting currents are. It takes a little practice, but it's not super difficult. It's not really a separate cast. It's just a variation of a good overhead cast.
Yeah, and then there's also if you do that cast and then do the the S, what's that? Is that also called a reach? Where you kind of throw a couple S curves that put slack in it as it drops?
No, that's called a slack line cast, and I guess the reach cast is one slack line cast. The pile cast or parachute cast or other ones that are good to know, but it's all situational. You have to stand there and look at what the current's doing between you and where you think the fish are, and then you decide which one to use.
Yeah, gotcha. Like, for example, if you were on, fishing, you're on river left, river's flowing from right to left, and, you're making this cast maybe kind of quartering out, and there's some current that's pulling your line kind of in a downstream, right, dragging your fly. You could make the cast and then reach to the right, and that would put that mend in it as it drops, and then you don't have to mend upstream.
Right. And you may have to mend later on in the cast, but hopefully you don't. Hopefully you set it up so that you get a good drift without disturbing the water so much.
Yeah, nice. So casting is next, like you said, next level. That would be huge. If you're just a average or maybe struggling at your casting, to get that to a better level, that's a huge part of it.
Yep. And, learning to read the water better. I mean, in a lot of rivers, 90% of the water doesn't hold adult trout. And if you don't know, if there's nothing horizon, if you don't know where to put your fly, you could be spending a very unproductive day with your fly not being shown to any trout.
Right.
And so I go into reading the water quite a bit, talking about seams and rocks and currents and turbulence, but I kind of tell people there's 3 things you need to look for. Reading the water. One is water that's 2 to 4 feet deep, and velocity about 1 foot per second, which is kind of your standard steelhead velocity. Try to figure out what 1 foot per second is. Pretty easy to estimate it, and then uniform flow. So not a lot of turbulence, not a lot of bubbles, not a lot of swirls, but more uniform kind of choppy flow. And if you can find that stuff, you're going to find trout.
Right. And not to say you can't find trout in a deep slack pool sort of thing, but you're saying the most of the fish are in that kind of uniform flow.
When they're feeding. They might be in a deep slack slow or 6 feet down in a pool because they're spooked or sleeping or whatever they do when they're not eating, but they really prefer to feed in that kind of water. And that's what we're trying to do is feed them, right? So we got to put the fly where they're eating.
Gotcha. Okay, good. So that's it. So that's a good distinction where they're feeding. And we're going to be heading out, I think, next year doing a trip. I love brook trout. We've got some out here as well, but I haven't done a lot of brook trout fishing. We're planning on heading out with kind of the Mossy Creek crew, and I know you know those guys, I think, Kobe and the crew. Talk about that a little bit. If we're thinking brook trout and we're talking about reading the water, I've never been up to some of these waters. I think we're going into the Shenandoah. Maybe describe that a little bit. What could I expect on that? Is reading water going to be key to catching fish there? I know brook trout maybe are easier to catch than other species, but what's your take?
Yeah, it is. Of course, if you're going with the Trove brothers, they're going to know right where the fish are.
Yeah, right.
But if you're, let's say you're on your own. Brook trout are actually supremely well adapted to headwater streams. And we think of them as being really sensitive, but they can actually outcompete rainbows and browns when you get into these very sterile, cold, little more acidic waters. They're better adapted to living in that kind of situation. And, in a small stream, of course, depth is always a limiting factor. You have to look for water that's. What I tell people is to look for places where the rocks on the bottom start to get blurry. And it's probably because predators can't see them when they're that deep, right? Oh. And the water doesn't have to be that deep, but if the rocks on the bottom are blurry, you probably got enough depth. And then brook trout are going to tend to be very close, adjacent to the main current flow, because these streams do not have a lot of food and a lot of hatches. And when the fish are feeding, they're going to need to be close to that main flow. So, if, you get off to the sides and the back and the slack water, not so much. Of course you can catch them there, or will catch them there. But, if you're playing the odds, you want to look for that depth, and then you want to look for areas just off the side of the main flow, not where there's a lot of bubbles and turbulence, but, seams on the edge of fast water. And brook trout are well adapted to, eating a beetle now and an ant an hour later, and maybe going for a day without food. They're really good at maximizing, and that's why they're so aggressive, because they don't know where their next meal's coming from in this environment. Fly pattern isn't usually that important. You got to have something that looks buggy and put it over their head, and they'll probably eat it.
Wow, that's awesome. So basic, and is the foam is home, right? Is that applied to brook trout?
Yeah, foam, but not the frothy foam. For trout in general, foam is home, because that shows you where the main current thread is, right? That's where the food is. Mm-hmm. And, foam, as it goes down through a slow pool, especially, the fish are going to be pegged to that foam line.
Yeah.
By foam, people don't mean the turbulent, bubbly stuff, but just bubbles on the surface, as opposed to bubbles throughout the water column, because the fish can't see their food if they're in, submerged bubbles.
Right. Okay.
And they actually can't hold their position very well, because if you get too much air in the water, although it's highly oxygenated, the fish can't hold their position because it's not dense enough to hold them in place.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So it's a constant struggle for, really any trout. But is brook trout fishing, talking about fishing up there in the Shenandoah, is it a lot different than, say, fishing rainbows lower down in that system? Say, I'm not sure, even the other rivers. I guess it's in the Potomac, but yeah.
No, not really. Yeah. Not really. The trout are trout. And, with brook trout, you sometimes have to cover a lot of ground, because, you could have 50 yards of a creek that's unproductive, totally unproductive, because there's just not the habitat. So typically in brook trout fishing, in these headwater streams, which is the only place they can survive because the water's cold enough, you got to move a lot.
Mm.
You just keep moving. And if a fish is there and you make a couple casts, fish is either going to eat your fly or be spooked.
Right.
They're not going to sit there and eyeball it like a brown trout in the Henry's Fork might, or rainbow in the Henry's Fork. They're either going to eat or they're going to be scared.
That's right. Yeah. And if you take it to the Henry's Fork where you're at, you're on the famous, because we floated the lower section down there and had a pretty good day. But what was that section you were like up there? Like, talk about that fishing versus, say, brook trout fishing. Totally different.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's like a whole other world. I'm talking about the railroad ranch on the Henry's Fork, and it's smooth water. There's tons of bugs. The fish see a lot of angling pressure, and they feed when they feel like it.
Yeah, exactly.
And because they got food all the time, and they're spooky because the water's clear and it's flat, mostly flat, and you gotta be on your A game there. And those fish are selective about fly pattern. There aren't many. I don't think there's many trout rivers in this country where fish are really that selective to a particular insect and a particular stage of the insect.
Right.
But the Henry's Fork is one of them for sure.
Yeah, it is. God, this is great. Yeah, it seems like, it's another one of those for me. I haven't fished that reach. And how does it feel for you? Because we talked about this last time when you were on, just about places to go. And, none of us are as well traveled as some of these guys out there like Jeff Currier and people like that. But are you still on a track? Like, how do you, when you look at your next trips, do you have kind of a list of things you're like, okay, I want to get these? It sounds like down South America and all that is a big one for you. But what are your thoughts there? Has that changed? Has that evolved in the last few years?
Yeah, it kind of has as I get older.
Yeah.
I kind of I still like to explore, and I still like to see new things and learn new things, but I kind of gravitate more towards familiar places. I'm not a really philosophical angler. I don't focus on the touchy-feely stuff, even though I do feel it, and it's a spiritual experience for me. I don't think about it that much, and so I like to go where I know I can catch fish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of these people that says, "Oh, I don't care if I don't catch any fish. I just like to be out there waiting in the water." Well, I like to catch at least one fish.
Yeah,
every day.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So my guess is you haven't done a lot of steelhead fishing lately, given the
Yes. I love steelhead fishing when I'm in the moment, but I like steelhead, Atlantic salmon.
Oh yeah.
It's just I don't want to go someplace where I might spend a week and not catch a fish.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'll do it, but and I love it when I'm there. But if I'm thinking about someplace I want to go, I'd rather go trout fishing or bone fishing, where things are a little more predictable.
Yeah.
And if you do things right, you can catch a fish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, bonefish, not permit or some other, right? The real tough ones, muskie. I mean, it feels to me, and this is again, I haven't always been interested in salt as much, but it just feels almost overwhelming with all the options now. That seems weird to say because I know I'm not going to be able to go everywhere. But what is your thought there? Does it feel overwhelming to you? All these places, all these great, fishing opportunities.
It does. There's so many, Dave, there's so many places that I haven't been to that I want to go to. And, I've never fished at Deschutes.
Yep.
I've never fished the Au Sable in Michigan. I've never been to New Zealand. I've never been to Slovenia. There's just so many places. And what's sort of frustrating is that we have so much great fishing in North America that, I've never been to the driftless region of Wisconsin, and I really want to go there. So people shouldn't feel insecure or, that they've missed out because they haven't been to these places. You just have to, go where you can afford to go and where you have the time to go. And you won't ever see all these wonderful places.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great take is that. And we've had people say that before. I can't remember. We had a guest on that I was asking them about places to go, and she was saying that, hey, we got these amazing places in North America. Just because you're not going to the Seychelles doesn't mean you're a crappy fisherman, right? We got tons of good stuff here, right, in this country, and including salt, like all the striper fish, like all sorts of good salt fishing.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, I do a lot of striped bass fishing here in New England. And I just love it. And, I can drive to it. Doesn't cost me a lot of money. I have friends with houses there or that rent houses. And, it's world class. It's crystal clear water. Fish are in 2 or 3 feet of water. It's all sight fishing, or it can be all sight fishing. And fish can be, up in the high 30 inches to 40 some inches. Catching those on a crab fly in shallow water is pretty cool.
Amazing.
And that's within reach of, so many people.
Yeah.
Easily within reach of so many people.
We've got Daniel on today from Northern Rockies Adventures. He's here to share some of the Northern BC, some fishing tips today. How you doing, Daniel?
Excellent. Yeah, today I'd like to talk about why I love to fish for Arctic grayling.
Nice. Yes. An Arctic grayling are a species that I love catching. It's been a while. Up in Alaska was the last time I was out for them. They're this amazing, beautiful, colorful fish. So tell us why you love grayling.
Yeah, I just can't stop fishing for them. They're always so keen to take a fly, and they put on one heck of a fight for their size. They're just incredibly feisty. I kind of call them our little northern sailfish, just based off of the beautiful dorsal fin that they have. They're just an excellent fly fishing species. They slurp dries. They'll go for nymphs. Even in the choppiest rivers, you'll find them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we're going to be following up with you, and we've got an episode with you coming up here December 20th, 2023. The Founders episode will be episode 540, so if anybody's listening in the future, they could check that out and get the full story. But we're going to be doing some more of these little short snippet intros as well. So until we talk to you again, Daniel, thanks again.
Thank you. Well, looking forward to it.
Well, this is good. So we started this talking about kind of taking, the fly fishing kind of to the next level. We've mentioned a few big things, right? We've talked casting, reading water, kind of those types of things. What else would you add to this list? So again, take it back to me. Like I want to get to that next level where I am kind of, better than I am. What would you tell me?
Well, this is more for someone who hasn't been fishing that long, but I tell people not to sweat the entomology. People worry that they have to know the genus and the species of a mayfly to catch trout. And of course, you and I know that's ridiculous. If you want to get into entomology, seriously, that's fine. It might help your fishing a little bit. But I tell people just know the basic orders of insects. So be able to tell a midge from a mayfly, from a caddisfly, from a stonefly. Mm-hmm. Those 4 at all life stages. Be able to tell what the nymph looks like. And then spend a lot more time observing the behavior of the insects and the behavior of the fish. You don't need to know that much about those bugs. Watch what they do and watch how the fish react to them. The best anglers are the ones that are most observant, and they see something on one river and then they apply it to the next river. So I tell people, don't sweat entomology. It's scared more people away from fly fishing more than it's scared more.
Really, more than casting, more than the challenge of casting that people think.
It scared more people away from fly fishing than anything except the blood knot.
Oh, the blood knot. That's a funny thing because the blood knot is the one I learned first, but it is for some reason. Yeah, the surgeon's knot is way easier.
Yeah, but a good blood knot is about the best as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Why is that? Why do you like the blood knot?
I think it's stronger. It's cleaner.
Yep.
Surgeon's knot's great and it's quick, but if you don't tighten a surgeon's knot properly, it's going to be worthless. So it's easy to tie, but it's easy to screw it up.
Yeah.
And a blood knot, once you get it tied, once you poke both of those ends through and you tighten it, you're done. It's done. It's good.
Do you find that on that blood knot, you can clip the tags as tight as you want, or do you always leave a tiny little tag end?
Absolutely. When knots break, that extra tag is not going to offer you any more insurance. And I see people leaving longer tags because they think they're getting a little extra insurance. Not true. And also, the tags catch, particularly if you're fishing like a dry and 3 nymphs or 2 nymphs
under
it.
Hassle.
That's another point of contact.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get tangled. So clip them just as short as you can. If you got 5 turns in your blood knot and you've tightened it properly, always test knots. It's one of the other things that I
Yep.
tell people in this, because you can tie a perfect looking knot that's no good. And I don't know why, but always test your knots, always test your knots.
Test not. And how do you test not? Just grab it and pull as hard as
Just
you can.
grab it and pull it to the point where you think it should hold.
Yep.
It's kind of hard to describe, but after you get used to it a while, you can tell.
Yeah, you can tell exactly. Nice. So I love this, and so entomology again. It's it's one of those things of fly fishing. I think why fly fishing is great, because it is another topic in fly fishing where you can take it as far as you want and just nerd,
you can,
right?
yeah,
and that's great.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's what makes fly fishing awesome. Have you taken entomology like to the next level, or do you kind of stick to just the basics?
Well, it's interesting because I minored in aquatic entomology in college.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew the bugs pretty well. And there were times when I had to know what mayfly this was that was hatching. And I don't do it much anymore. A PMD is a PMD, and it's cream, it's size 16. That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
I don't bother much with worrying what species or even what genus it is.
Right. And how do you do that? If you're on a stream, you talked about the behavior of the bug. How would you determine the behavior? You got all these bugs going around. First, do you catch them with a net, or do you just kind of watch the bugs, see how the fish are eating? How do you monitor that?
Well, I watch the bugs. Sometimes I'll catch them in the net just to see what, sometimes things are in the surface film that you can't see very well, unless you get in same current lane as the fish. So I will occasionally, put a net in the water, a little net. Actually, one of the best things to do is to buy a 5-gallon paint strainer net from Home Depot or hardware store. And they have an elastic thing on. You can slide it over your net, and it makes the best insect net there is. Yeah, I haven't heard of that. Costs about $5 for 2 of them.
Oh, perfect.
And I'll do that occasionally, but most of the time I'll just look at the water. People really need to learn that fish can't eat the bugs unless they're on the water. And people will see clouds and clouds of caddisflies in the air. And those caddisflies often are just migrating. They can live for a month or so out of the water, unlike mayflies. So people see they see the air full of caddis, and they think, "Oh boy, I'm in the middle of a caddis hatch."
Yeah.
If you look at the water, there may be no caddis on the water. There might be some mayfly spinners, and the trout that are rising are not eating those caddisflies because they're never getting on the water.
Right.
So, being observant as to what is on the water and what the flies are doing, if they're hatching, if they're actually hatching, sometimes an emerger works better, or sometimes even a little twitch because the flies are pretty active. If they're spinners, if they're spent, you have to avoid drag at all costs because those bugs are not moving at all. They're half dead. So just, being observant as to what stage, and you don't need to know what genus and species that mayfly is. You got it right in front of you. It's, it's got a rusty body and clear wings, and it's size 16. That's what you need to know.
Yeah, that's it. And I think I always go, whenever we get in these conversations, I always highlight the Rick Hafley. We've had him on. He is an entomologist, and I think he's been on your podcast. So I'll put a link to the show notes to that episode. But I think he talked about that one thing that he said too on size. He was like, hey, things are always smaller, always go a little bit smaller than you think on these, at least with your hooks.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true because they look bigger in the air and on the water. And if you finally capture one, you put it on your finger, you realize, oh my God, that thing is a lot smaller than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Nice. So this is entomology, behavior, fish behavior, and really it comes down to, like you said, being observant, maybe just sitting down on the bank and before you fish, watch what's going on, what's hatching. Maybe there's a couple of caddis that are dipping, laying eggs. Now, if that's happening, if you see a few caddis kind of dip into the water, does that feel like you're ready to maybe try a caddis, or do you need to see a bunch of caddis doing that?
Depends.
Yeah.
If the caddis are dipping on the water and the fish aren't rising, I probably won't fish a caddisfly. If they're dipping on the water, they're generally going to. A lot of them actually go underwater to lay their eggs, so they're going to be in the water, under the water. So but maybe a wet fly might work better.
Yeah, wet fly just under the surface. Man, See, and that's where you start to get into this. That's where you could just start going, right? And deeper, and then say like, okay, a cat, because caddis seem to be the one that, I don't know, it seems to be the bug that's maybe a little, not as much, it's not as talked about. Do you find, it seems like all the mayfly hatches are so prevalent, the stoneflies, I don't know, midges. What's your take? Do you fish caddis a lot, or do you fish midges all equally?
I fish caddis pupa a lot because I think the fish like that stage. And when I'm fishing subsurface, if there's any caddis flies around at all, I will, if I'm nymph fishing, I'll put some sort of thing that looks like a caddis pupa on. The adults, unless I actually see fish eating the adults on the surface, I'll generally stick with an emerger or a deep pupa or something. And I've seen a lot of situations where, and this isn't in all rivers, but in a lot of rivers, if there's both caddis and mayflies on the water, fish tend to gravitate toward the mayflies. I think caddis hatch very quickly. They skitter around a lot. Fish don't like their food moving.
Right.
They don't like to have to chase a hamburger around the room to bite it.
Yeah.
And mayflies are generally a lot more sedate. So, but then again, you'll have people that say, "Oh, caddisflies are the most important trout stream insect because they fish on rivers where caddisflies are more abundant, or the particular species that they're of caddis that's hatching rides the water longer or comes back to the water and lays their eggs." So you can't take that as gospel.
Yeah.
But generally mayflies seem to be more important. And then there's rivers where midges are more important, particularly a lot of tailwaters where midges are more abundant because, particularly below dams, the oxygen level's a little bit lower, right below a dam. And mayflies and caddisflies don't do as well, but midges are, adapted to living in really extreme environments. In fact, that's often a sign of overly polluted waters where you see lots of midges and nothing else.
Oh, right. Yeah. And midges are another one of those species. I mean, they're tiny. They feel like, for me at least, they feel like they're kind of a challenging insect. Do you find it shouldn't be that much more difficult than fishing mayflies?
Oh, I love a good midge hatch. Again, I'll usually fish a pupa or an emerger instead of an adult. But boy, when fish get on midges and really get on them, it can be really cool fishing. And you got to go small, and none of us like to go small. And I never have enough small flies in my box because I don't like tying them.
Yeah,
I don't like tying them as much. And I've told myself, all right, you're going to tie more size 22 and 24 olives and midges this year than you're going to tie 18s because you see more small ones. And I'm just not smart enough to have those smaller flies in my box. But when you need them, you need them.
Yeah, that's so cool. And where do you take, like with this conversation we're having, do you guys have a spot on the Orvis Learning Center that goes deep into all this entomology and stuff?
Yeah, there's one segment called Hatches that's on the Orvis Learning Center, Fishing Hatches.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I pretty much use this philosophy that you need to know them to the order level. You don't need to know all the real detailed entomology.
Yeah.
But knowing the order and knowing their life cycle is going to help you a lot.
Yep. Perfect. So this is good. So I think that, obviously there's a bunch of different, angles we could take this, but I do want to, you mentioned actually hatch strategies was another thing I think you're doing at that Virginia festival. I think that might be, I'm not sure if that's a paid section, but have we been talking about some of these strategies? What is that? Maybe you can give us a primer on that a little bit. What are hatch strategies? Have we covered some of it here?
Yeah, the hatch strategy philosophy that I use is that people spend too much time worrying about the fly pattern and think that if they have a good imitation of the bug, they're going to be able to catch fish. And they don't think as hard about things like the angle that they're approaching the fish and what the fish's rhythm is, and also your leader. I think the most critical part of fishing a hatch is your leader, even more so than the fly.
Wow.
People don't fish leaders that are long enough. If you got a slow pool or a clear stream and you're fishing a 9-foot leader, you're probably going to spook more fish than and all of a sudden the fish stop rising and you say, oh, the hatch must have stopped. But it's because you were landing your fly line on top of them.
Right.
And I've taken a lot of pictures from underwater of a fly line landing, even like a 3 or 4 weight, and a leader landing, even the butt section of a leader. And a fly line produces so much more commotion when it hits the water than a leader butt does. And it's not the fact that it's opaque, I don't think, because fish see stuff drifting down, branches and leaves and crap all the time. It's not the clearness of your leader, it's the fact that it's more air resistant. So I urge people to use longer leaders, particularly during a hatch, and use longer tippets. You can extend the butt section of your leader with a piece of 23 thousandths mono, which I always carry. I always carry, along with my 2, 3, 4, 5X, 6X tippets, I always carry a spool of 23 thousandths mono. And if I think I'm spooking fish, like if there's a fish rising and I make a couple casts and it stops, it's probably because I disturbed it.
Yeah.
And by lengthening, just taking 3 feet of 23 thousandths and adding that to my leader with a 3-turn blood knot, I find that I can get a better presentation.
Right. Yeah, right. That makes total sense. So, and then you would know that just because, you cast, the fish stop rising. And how do you know how long of a leader to make? And I know that all depends on the river, but is there on that situation, how long would you be going for your leader?
As long as you're comfortable with, the longer the better.
Right.
And look at Euro nymphing. It's all leader, right?
Yep.
There's no disturbance.
Yep.
And a 14-foot leader is a lot more difficult to cast than a 9-footer, but you're going to be better off and just have to increase your line speed a little bit to try to turn over that longer leader.
Yeah. Were you guys, back to the South Fork, I'm just curious on this one. Were you guys fishing when you're out of the boat? Were you doing like a lot of dry dropper? How were you doing that when you're going down the river?
We were fishing mainly from the boat, so we were fishing dry dropper a lot and double dries. Particularly for those cutthroats in the South Fork are so surface oriented. Often nymph fishing isn't that productive for big cutthroats.
Yeah,
you're better off with a big hopper or a mutant stone or October caddis, and then a smaller size 18 blue wing olive behind it than you are with a dry dropper.
Yeah.
But that's for cutthroats.
That's cutties. Yeah. Because there's rainbows in there too, which is a whole nother.
Yeah. There's rainbows and browns, but double dry is often super effective.
Double dry. Perfect. Nice. So that's leaders, and you mentioned leader, fly line, and not spooking. So I guess that's going back just to that sort of, I guess, what would you call that category? That's kind of the hatch matching, right? That's where you're trying to get there, but it's not just about the fly. It's about your whole setup and even about how you're approaching them.
Yeah, it's about your strategy. And when I see a fish rising somewhere, like on the Henry's Fork, which is very difficult,
Yep.
I'll sit on the bank and I'll see a fish rising. And the first thing that I'll think about is, okay, do I want to approach this fish from straight downstream, across stream, or do I want to try to get way above the fish and do a downstream presentation with a reach cast so that the fish sees my fly before my leader and tippet? And every fish is different. Depends on the current, depends on how close you think you can get to the fish. So, every fish is a little bit different. And every rising fish during a hatch, the first thing you want to decide is, okay, what approach am I going to use to that fish?
Right. Before you do anything, like how am I going to get my fly presented correctly? And that might be, is that ever like you make the cast where the fly hits the water and is presented, or maybe the leader doesn't even hit the water? Is that a possibility? Are you ever thinking about that?
No, the leader's got to hit the water right after the fly.
There's no way to avoid that.
No, but I think sometimes getting above a fish and doing a reach cast so that the fly goes over the fish first on really fussy fish can be a benefit. I know that I had a really frustrating day. My last day on the Henry's Fork, I fished with a buddy, and we were fishing the below the ranch, which is really, really difficult water. And the fish were rising pretty good in the morning. And I was watching the fish, and I could not get a fly to float over the fish without the fish stopping rising. I watched their rhythm, and they would stop or they would move even if I got way above them and threw a downstream drift. I mean, these are fish that have been fished for all season. The water was low. It was a bright, sunny day. And I said to my buddy Bob, I said, you know what? It ain't the fly. It's not the fly that's causing us not to catch fish. It's the fact that we can't get a drift over these fish.
Yeah.
And we couldn't. I mean, we caught a couple small ones, but, the bigger fish, we just could not get a drift over them. And maybe if I was a smarter angler, I could have figured it out.
Yeah. That's it. This reminds me of, like steelhead fishing, like on the Deschutes, which I've been in those situations where I know exactly where the fish are. It's like a little section of a couple feet within a big run. But the currents are so kind of different over rocks and stuff that I can't get that fly presented correctly. And then sometimes I'm just like, oh man, I know where the fish are, but I can't do it. I mean, when you get to that situation, you just give it a shot, and then eventually you're like, okay, that fish, they kind of won it that day. Is that how it works?
Yeah, if they keep rising, I'll work a fish for 3 hours. If I don't spook it, I'll keep working it. And probably if I was smart enough on that situation at Henry's Fork, I would have put a really long 6X tippet on.
Right.
But the problem is that a good fish in the Henry's Fork with 6X and all the weeds, you're never going to land it.
Yeah,
you're done. So you kind of try to do the best you can with 5X.
Yep.
And longer tippet is always a good idea. It lands softer, it's more air resistant.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's also more drag resistant because it's less mass.
Yeah.
So a long piece of 5X is probably better than a short piece of 6X.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and then even 6.5, right? Even the trout hunter, I think, right? They have even in the points in betweens. This is good. Well, let's take it out of here real quick with the. This is going to be the Ask Me Anything segment, which again presented by the Virginia Fly Fishing and Wine Festival. I think you have this segment on. You're doing this at the show, right? There's like an Ask Me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So how is that one? Is that one where you show up and it's like, okay, here we go, just throw the questions left and right at you? Is that how that looks?
Yeah, and I think last year it was a women only.
Oh, maybe it is.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's this year, but yeah. And that was really fun. There were some great questions. And, some of them I couldn't answer. And, people love it when someone like me who's been fishing a long time will say, I don't have a clue.
Right, they stump you. They're stumping Tom, right?
I can't answer that. I don't know. And people love that. They, it gives them confidence that even somebody that's been doing this for well over 50 years doesn't have an answer.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Well, let me, I'll try to think of a couple of quick ones as we get out of here.
Okay.
But, I guess one of them was just getting back to, the gear, because I always love the gear. Everybody loves the gear. Orvis, I mean, you guys have, like, as far as the rod line, maybe look at this last year. What is the, if you're getting that rod for, let's just go to brook trout. We were talking about, we got that trip coming up. What is the Orvis brook trout? What is a good rod for those high mountain streams, Shenandoah, that stuff?
Well, I like a not super short, but relatively short, lightweight rod. Not that it's always the most efficient, but those fish aren't going to be very big. And it's really fun to fish them with a light rod. So I like a 7.5 foot 3-weight. And I fish it in the H3 premium. I fish it in the Recon. I fish it in the Clearwater, which are lower priced rods. But 7.5 foot 3 is really nice because, even a little brook trout will put a bend in the rod. And it's just a light little rod. I don't recommend people go any shorter than that because a lot of times in small streams, you're casting only the leader and you're trying to keep your fly line off the water.
Yeah.
And so you have to hold your rod a little higher, and a short rod is kind of a disadvantage there.
Oh.
And honestly, a short rod in brushy streams does not give you that much of an advantage. People think it does, but when you actually get into the water, you realize that, you're still going to get hung up in the branches, even with a 7-footer, 6.5 footer.
Yeah. What is the shortest rod that you have or that's out there?
The shortest rod I have is 7.5 feet. I don't go any shorter.
Yeah. Are there rods, but there are rods that Orvis makes or others that are shorter than 7.5?
Boy, you got me there. I think there might be a 6.5 or something.
Yeah, I haven't heard of one though. Yeah, it seems like 7.5. Yeah, that range is the.
Yeah, I know there's some 7-footers.
Yeah,
but,
some 7-footers.
I like 7.5 for a 3 or a 4 on those small streams.
Okay, perfect. Good. And so my other one here is just on podcasts, because I love that, the Orvis podcast comes up a lot because, how long have you guys been doing that? When did that start? Remind me again.
God, I don't know. It's like 12 years, I think.
Yeah, it's been 12 years. So it's been longer than most been going out there. You guys just rolling along. Have there been in the last few years any changes, or do you guys on the program pretty much have been doing the same thing that's been working, like the first, few years you started?
Oh, it's evolved. Yeah. The first few podcasts, it was just me talking, and they were pretty lame.
Yeah.
And so, it gradually evolved into about half of the podcast is where people send in questions, and I try to answer them or try to find them an answer. And then the other half is an interview. And, I've gone a lot more to trying to find scientists who are studying these ecosystems that we care about so much, hydrologists, and kind of help educate people on the environment a little bit more and threats to the environment. Those are super popular. And I'm doing more now because my job has changed a little bit. I don't have as many responsibilities that involve things like spreadsheets and
right.
Analysis, and I'm doing more education stuff now. So I do a podcast almost every week.
Oh yeah,
as it's a lot of work to get to arrange one, and then I have to read all the questions and try to figure out answers. But I've been doing one almost one a week. And so that's different. I used to do them maybe twice a month just because I had other responsibilities and I didn't have time. And I think I'm doing a better job at them now because I spend more time preparing for them.
Uh-huh. Yep. And what's your main preparation? How do you, you got a guest coming in, let's say it's a great big scientist. How do you prepare for that person?
I don't prepare as much as you think in that regard. I look at their bio.
Yeah.
But I don't give them a list of questions, and I ask them to just outline what you might want to say. And I don't want to know too much about the subject because I find that if I'm really curious, I'm probably going to ask the same questions that my listeners are going to ask. So I always try to get people on the podcast that know more than me about a particular subject.
Yeah.
Know a lot more than me, so that I stay engaged and I'm asking questions that I think people will want to know. So I don't prepare as much on the subject as I do just getting the right guest and and answering the questions in what we call the fly box.
Yeah, in the fly box. That's perfect. And then out of all the guests you've had on, and I know it's probably like me where you start to not remember all of them, but
yeah.
Are there any that you think back, you're like, oh man, I was a little nervous for that episode, that person? Because you're Tom Rosenbauer, right? You've had all these people. Does that ever come up to you in the episode?
Yeah. There were two, and they're my two personal favorites, just because they're heroes of mine. One was Tom McGuane.
Oh wow.
Which I was very nervous about because I've been a huge Tom McGuane fan. Mostly his non-fishing stuff. I mean, he's just an incredible writer. And that one I was nervous on. And of course, he was wonderful and warm and funny and put me at ease pretty quickly. And then John McPhee, my other literary hero, kind of in the nonfiction realm. I had always wanted to have John McPhee on. And of course, he was absolutely wonderful as well. So, those are the two that I think I was most nervous about.
There you go. And once you got on, did it feel like once you got rolling, you were good to go and the anxiety kind of went away a little bit?
Oh yeah. It did right away.
Yeah. That's the cool thing about doing the podcast is that I've had that happen a lot. And yeah, it's one of those fun things about it because we're all just humans, at the end of the day, whether it's some person like McGuane or a billionaire or whatever it is, that person, it's just like, we're all people. And
we all share the same passion too.
Yeah. And it's fly fishing, right?
Yeah.
So that's good. Nice, Tom. Well, I think this has been another amazing one. We will send everybody out, obviously, to Orvis.com. If they have questions for you, a podcast at Orvis.com will be a good place. And I know we have a ton of listeners that listen to your podcast and ours, so I think this is going to be a great episode. Anything else before we get out here? I want to give a shout out to the Virginia Festival that is coming. Any words of advice to anybody that are thinking about maybe hitting that festival?
If you have any interest at all in going, do it, because it's a really fun event. I really enjoy it, and bring the family.
Yeah,
bring your kids. It's very family oriented. They have activities and casting for kids. And if you're a woman, you shouldn't feel intimidating. They have women often get intimidated at fly fishing events because it's still such a male bastion, but women are very welcome and welcoming there. And it's just great.
Yeah, it's perfect. All right, Tom. Well, thanks for your time today. And we'll definitely, as always, be in touch, and appreciate everything you do out there.
Well, Dave, thank you. You're a great interviewer, and you have a great podcast, and it's always fun to talk to you.
That is a wrap. You can grab all of the show notes at wetflyswing.com. And please follow us on Instagram and share this episode out with someone you love. Please send me an email, dave@wetflyswing.com, if you have any feedback or want us to put together an episode on this podcast for you. Check in anytime. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and would love to meet up with you on the water. We have new fly fishing schools going all year long and all around the country, so if you want to connect, let's do it right now. All right, time to get out of here. I hope you have a great evening. I hope you have a great morning or great afternoon wherever in the world you are. And I appreciate you for stopping by and checking out the show today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com.